Okay, before we get into our routine, let's spend a minute laying on our back and just observing how our body feels today. Helpful things to pay attention to is how your body's making contact with the ground. Notice if there's a difference between your left foot and your right foot. Behind the knee on the left side, behind the knee on the right side. How the back of the thighs on the left side is making contact versus the right side. An important part will be the low back. Many people feel a difference here with how the pelvis, the sacrum, and the low back is making contact with the ground from side to side. And also, same thing with the upper back and shoulders. This is another common area that feels different for many people from side to side. So take stock of how it feels now, and then after you finish your routine, come back to this position and see if anything has changed. To perform this exercise, you want to have something elevated, and you want to put your body weight in front of you against a wall or something stable and strong. From there, bring your heel down on the right foot and think about getting your toes up. To do the exercise, you're going to push the heel down, hold for a couple seconds, then you're going to come to neutral. You don't want to go above neutral, meaning you're not doing a calf raise on the top position. You're just going to neutral, and then you're going to pull the heel down while trying to imagine you're pulling the toes up. And at the bottom position, hold for 2 to 3 seconds to really exaggerate the stretch. Now pay attention to what the rest of your body's doing. See if your body's trying to escape the stretch in some way. Maybe your neck is taking tension or your low back. Really make sure you identify where the stretch is and try to get a little bit more every time, right? Try to exaggerate the stretch at that position. Maybe you can move your toes and foot around a little bit to get more. And the point is to get the stretch, right? So make sure you're getting that in this position. Let's now go to the left side so you can see a different angle for me. And I'm doing the same thing, right? I'm pulling that heel down. And notice how I adjust my feet every now and then, right? I don't want to just be doing this position passively without feeling some type of stretch happening in the calf. So adjust as necessary. See if you can coordinate the breath with the movement. So you're going to exhale as you bring the heel down. And when you bring the foot up, do an inhale. And then breathe out again as you push the heel down. And one thing I didn't mention is that at the end of the exercise, at the end of the movement, you're going to hold that position for a little longer, right? So you're holding for about 2 to 3 seconds at each rep. But on that last rep, like I'm doing here, hold for at least 8 to 10 seconds. And you can hold it for even longer if it feels good today, but the point of holding it for that long is just to get deeper into the stretch. For this exercise, we're going to do 2 minutes per side. We're going to do a quick check in the pelvis to make sure it's level. And then, doing the left side first, the right foot's going to come on the toes. And while the right side's on the toes, we're going to try to start lifting the left leg a few inches off the ground using our hip flexor muscles. Now, with each lift, we really want to feel like we're getting the movement from the hip flexors, which is maybe the hip crease and a little closer to the knee as well. That anywhere in that location is good. For many people, when we really zoom in, we notice that the shoulders try to help, the upper body tenses, the neck tenses, the core wants to help. It's really important, therefore, every time you lift the leg, see I'm tapping my core here to make sure I'm not using the core touching. You can do that all over your neck, your chest. Just feel around to make sure nothing else is contracting. So when we bring the leg down, we want to relax everything, not just the hip flexors, but the whole body. And then when we raise the hip again, when we raise that leg again, We want to really zoom into that hip flexor to see if we can really use the hip flexor to raise the leg. So bringing everything down, relaxing everything, and then engaging the left hip flexor as we raise the leg up in the air. And if you're not feeling the contraction and you're not really sure why, it's usually because you need to pay attention and zoom in even more. Relax even more. Really pay attention. Closing your eyes could be really helpful here. I think, yeah, my eyes are closed in the video. So really play around with that, really pay attention to what else is going on in the body. And I see many people with hip flexion that's just not where it needs to be. So now we're going to do the other side, and you can see my left foot coming up on my toes. And now checking the pelvis really quick as we change sides, because when we go to another hip, the pelvis might do something weird. And from there, we're going to now work the right hip flexor. And we're going to raise and relax the body as we come down, let go of all the contractions, whether it's in the hip or whether it's a compensatory pattern like the shoulders, core, neck, or something like that. And with each rep, try to get a little bit more. And we're not trying to raise the leg really fast or really high up in the air. It's controlled, right? It's a mindful exercise. We're trying to get better at this movement and not just, quickly and aggressively shove the leg up into the air. We're trying to be mindful on the way up, really seeing if we could feel that hip flexor contract, and then when we come down, we really let go and see if there's something holding on in the upper body or somewhere else other than the target muscle group. And again, trying to get something in the hip crease or maybe a little bit higher toward the knees, good too. And that's really that hip flexor muscle group that for many people is not really working the way we want it to. And if this gets really hard for 2 minutes, next time you do it, feel free to do a little bit less time, maybe a minute. But see if you could work your way up to 2 minutes per side. And we're getting to about 2 minutes right now on the right, and that's good for this exercise. In the hip focused cat-cow position, our main intention here is to start creating this movement from the hips, and especially starting to get the muscles around the hip to contract. So going into an anterior tilt, we want to generate the movement from the hips, and we want to use the hip flexors, which are the front muscles of the hip located in the hip crease, also a little bit closer to the knee, and you want to feel all those muscles contract as you go into this arched position. And you want to go vertebrae by vertebrae, and you want to do the head and neck last, but at the same time the movement is still being generated from the hips. Now going into posterior tilt, you want to engage the glutes, and you want to get the glutes going and generating the entire movement for you, and slowly rounding each vertebrae until you get to the neck and head. Another important part of this exercise is to make sure that you're feeling both sides of the hips, right? So when we go into this arch position again, we're trying to get the left hip flexor and right hip flexor engaged equally. Now that may not happen at first, but just work on that as a target. And notice how my knees are staying under my hips and my wrists are staying under my shoulders. Do your best to maintain this symmetry throughout the exercise. And as I'm tucking, there may be for some of you, there may be an urge to move the knees forward, to move your body weight back. Again, see if you can maintain that nice steady position with the hips over the knees and the shoulders over the wrists. And a lot of people do this movement, right, in yoga class or wherever, but not with this intention, right? Not with really trying to feel the glutes, not to really trying to feel the hip flexors, and allowing the spine to be a reaction of what's happening at the pelvis, as opposed to everything just kind of moving at once together, right? So when you do this exercise, really think about those two main elements, right? Generating the movement at the pelvis and feeling the glutes and hip flexors on both sides of the hips work equally. So this is a different way for sure to do the cat-cow than you may be used to, and you'll probably see a big difference doing it this way. So enjoy. In this exercise, set up near a wall. You're then going to kick your legs up on the wall to get into an L position. And it's important here, you can try to get right up on the wall at first to see if you can do it, but most likely your pelvis and your low back is going to be off the ground, or your knees are going to be bent. So what I prefer you do is shift back away from the wall a little bit to a place where you can keep those knees straight and you can keep the low back flush on the ground. The next thing you're going to check is make sure the pelvis is in good alignment. It's not hiked or rotated in any direction. Then from there, you're going to put your arms out to the side, and the first thing you're going to do is really try to flex the quads. I know the hamstring and calves might be stretching pretty significantly here, but the initial goal here is to get the quads to contract. And a good way to do that is to think about straightening the knees, not hyperextending the knees, but just straightening them enough in order to get those quads to start engaging. The next thing you want to do is flex your toes, right? Flex your toes toward you, and that's going to help contract the shins a little bit, but also emphasize that quad contraction even further. And once you feel like you have the lower body operating well, place your focus on the upper body. It's really important to keep the upper body relaxed throughout this entire exercise. And for many people who are weak in hip flexion, the shoulders, the neck try to hijack this movement and try to do what the hips can't, because we're so bad at hip flexion, or because our function in hip flexion is poor, we rely on our upper body to take over. So really think about relaxing the upper body, bringing the shoulders down, relaxing the neck, and then coming back to the lower body and engaging those quads once again. Flexing those toes toward you, engaging those quads. Another thing to make sure here is that both kneecaps are pointing behind you, right? They're pointing away from you. Not one is, you don't want one knee rotated to the side and pointing out to the side. So just take a quick check of the kneecaps to make sure they're both pointing straight. And breathe. We have about 1.5 minutes left. And you could play around with the distance from the wall. If this is your first few times doing this, I don't recommend getting closer to the wall. Do it a few times. Get comfortable with the exercise. Make it easy at first before you really have to make this effortful. And we don't want this exercise to be effortful. That's not really the goal. Having said that though, if you have been pretty far from the wall for a while and it's getting easier, you can feel your quads well, the upper body is relaxed, then you can slowly challenge yourself a little bit more and move closer to the wall. But you don't want this to be extremely difficult. You want a good challenge here. You want the quads to be engaged and maybe a little bit of effort to keep the low back on the ground, but you don't want this to be very, very difficult. It is more of a passive kind of exercise versus a very strenuous active exercise. So we got about 25 seconds left here. Let's get a few more good breaths here. Breathing, engaging the quads, relaxing the upper body. And this is a great exercise to improve hip flexion. You could stay in here for a little longer if you want, but that's good for this exercise today. So set up this position with the wrists under the shoulders and the knees under the hips. You're then going to walk your hands up about a hand length forward. So your hands are a little bit in front of your shoulders when the exercise starts. You're going to shift your hips a little bit forward, and then you're going to sink into your shoulders. So you're going to put all the body weight down and bring your shoulders back. You're going to retract your shoulders. You're going to let the hips fall forward, and you're going to let the head and neck relax down. So your neck is not doing anything here, and your elbows stay locked. They stay straight. And all the body weight, imagine all the body weight going behind you, right? Falling into your scapula and your hips. For most people, this is going to be most intense in the shoulders, right? With the retraction and pulling the shoulders back and the body weight going there. But some people may also feel this in the hips, right? As those hips come forward and drop into more of an anterior tilt, you may feel the hip flexors working as well, and that's okay. And the reason why this is called all fours is because both sides of the hips and both sides of the shoulders are evenly taking body weight here. So it's a great way to build back function and stability in all 4 points of support. It may also feel difficult to keep those elbows straight, right? Because that's going to take some muscular effort and require some shoulder strength as well. So notice if you start getting lazy with your elbows and losing slack there. You want to make sure you keep those elbows nice and straight. And keep that neck relaxed. I could probably, watching myself do this now, I could probably even drop my head down even more. If I was in the room with myself watching this or doing this, I would put my head down a little bit so that neck could relax even more. But this is fine if you're here as well. And don't forget to breathe. Breathe through the belly. Just pay attention, observing what's going on, but not judging. And if 2.5 to 3 minutes is hard, eventually you want to work yourself up to about 3 minutes here. But it's okay to start with a minute or 90 seconds or 2 minutes and work your way up to staying in here for longer. So this is the all fours position. Okay, now that we've finished the routine, let's go back on the ground, lay down, and just like before, let's take note of what's going on in our body. How is our body making contact with the ground now after the routine compared to before the routine? And you don't have to go systematically like you did before the routine because you probably are aware of how things felt. So go straight to the most obvious areas and see what's changed. Maybe one side of your low back is making contact more evenly than before. Maybe your shoulders feel more even than before. It's going to be unique to you. Every experience is different. So every single time you do these routines, come in objectively, come in without judgment, and see what changes.